Good evening. You're watching the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what is making the headlines with political journalist and broadcaster Theo Usherwood and the deputy opinion editor at the FT, Miranda Green. They'll be with me from now until just before midnight. So let's see what is on some of those front pages. And the Prime Minister's decision to defy his critics and hand the Chagos Islands back to Mauritius leads the Metro, which headlines it Starmer's Chagos Island cave-in, Chaos Island cave-in, perhaps. That story also featuring on the front of the Telegraph. Its headline, £30 billion cost of Chagos surrender. It also makes the front page of the Times with the headline, Starmer hands over Chagos to Mauritius. On the front of the FT, US lawmakers passed Trump's showpiece tax bill by one vote. The main news in The Guardian is the threat of more strikes by teachers and nurses after their latest pay rises, which will not be fully funded by the government and which their employers will have to find at least in part. The Eye carries a warning from a former head of MI6 about the security implications of the government's targets for net zero carbon emissions. While the Express leads with the anger of murder victim Sarah Everard's family and news of government plans to release more prisoners halfway through their jail terms. And that is also the top story in the Daily Mail, which says Labour to release rapists and killers earlier. The Star says Manchester United could sell all of its players after another poor season. And finally, The Sun claims that the latest Doctor Who, Ncuti Gatwa, has been axed by the BBC after only 2 series. Well, Theo and Miranda are here with me in the studio. Shall we start? Well, the Chagos Islands seem to dominate a lot of the headlines this evening, Theo. A bit of a mixed bag on the whole, but Chagos on the front of the Telegraph to begin.
Yes, it's on the front of the Telegraph and on the front of the Times. Keir Starmer insisting this afternoon, as he got the deal finally over the line, despite that last-minute legal challenge that ran into 2 o'clock this morning. This was a good deal, amounts to £100 million a year. When you tot it all up, the figures total, the Conservatives claim £30 billion. There's some sleight of hand accounting from the government's point of view.
But it's all to do with inflation.
It's all to do with inflation.
If it stays at £101 million a year for 100 years, by the time it gets to the end, it'll be worth less. Precisely. So it's difficult to put a precise figure, but it's certainly more than the original £3.4 billion that the government is claiming it is. Politically, the Chagos Islands are, thousands, 5,000 miles from these shores, and you would think that actually these don't concern, the islands don't concern perhaps those key voters who are wondering about whether to come back to the Labour Party, having left the Labour Party at the local elections. But actually, I think this is going to be politically a really toxic problem for the government, where the optics of spending so much money on a deal that people are really scratching their heads around, going, was this actually the right deal? Did you need to go this far? Because, there's some extraordinary details come out in this agreement that we have to inform Mauritius before we launch a military operation from Diego Garcia, which is, of course, a key strategic base. At the same time, spending all this money when people are missing out on, when they're going to lose out on welfare payments. Yes, we're going to get some sort of backtracking on the winter fuel allowance, but by how much, we've yet to see the finer detail on that. I'm not sure even the government knows exactly what they're going to do. So I think this is, although it is easy to think, well, this story doesn't particularly matter, I think it does matter in strategically for Keir Starmer and his senior advisors in how they frame it. It also leads the front page of the Times as well. Starmer hands over Chagos to Mauritius is their headline. It's interesting the way that Theo framed the deal, because we're in the world of deal-making now, post-Trump coming back to the White House. Have Labour done a good deal here or not?
Well, they've now managed to do a US trade deal, an India trade deal, an EU trade deal, and now put the Chagos issue to bed. So from that point of view, you could say it's actually been quite a successful few weeks for Starmer's government in terms of international diplomacy. And actually, I would slightly quarrel with Theo's interpretation of the politics of this. I think in the short term, you're absolutely right. There's a kind of hit on, giving away territory. But actually, what this deal does is secure a strategically important military site And it's a deal which Starmer actually managed to get Trump to say, yes, this is a good deal at that famous meeting in the Oval Office, which wasn't expected, by the way. That was kind of a win for Britain that Trump approved it, because there'd been nervousness about that. And this deal is approved of by our partners in the Five Eyes Security Alliance of the, Anglosphere. So actually, it's true it's a long way away, but the deal itself matters, the substance of it, in a dangerous world. And that's the key thing about this government, isn't it? They've got all these domestic problems, and also we all know, as British voters, we're in a dangerous world, and our government's got to keep the security considerations
strategically
high
important
as well.
in a dangerous world, but if they have to tip off Mauritius when they're going to do anything military, well, who are Mauritius friends with? They're pretty friendly with China. So how strategically wise is this deal?
I think there's something else going on that I've certainly picked up in Westminster in the last week or so, and that is that the Keir Starmer's coming across a credibility problem. And there are a few things that have happened in the last couple of weeks. When they shot down, there was a story that came out about going back on the winter fuel allowance, and Number 10 came out and shot that story down really quickly.
Yeah.
And that made life difficult for a number of really senior political journalists, because it was well sourced and it turned out to be true. And Keir Starmer suddenly, they were suddenly saying, no, this isn't true. And I think when they're selling, they've put the line in the Telegraph at the bottom of the first column, putting the Tories in the same, being in the same column as Russia, China and Iran by opposing the deal. Well, they're not. They're allowed to oppose the deal without, you're allowed to oppose a deal as a leader, as the opposition, without being in the same column as Russia, China and Iran. I mean, it reminds me of, other claims where, Lucy Powell, the leader of the House of Commons, turned around and said, there'd be a run on the pound if the government didn't bring in the winter fuel allowance. It's worth just remembering. It's worth remembering Keir Starmer, and I suggest some people in Number 10 go and give their head a wobble over the half term. But why they were successful? They were successful because there was this juxtaposition between a serious, stern but fair Prime Minister or Prime Minister in waiting who had the interests of the British people at heart versus the chaos of the Conservative Party. That credibility mattered. And when Boris Johnson and Liz Truss behaved in a way that hit their credibility and denied stories and lied effectively, that meant it was very difficult to win back that trust. And I think Number 10 would be wise just to bear that in mind in how they do their business.
Miranda, should we switch focus to the front page?
I mean, I would just say on that,
Please.
a U-turn is always completely wrong until it happens, isn't it? I mean, that's the nature of a U-turn. I agree with you about trust. I agree with you on the trust. I know.
There's a way of framing it, and simply shooting the story down, so people are like, well, actually, no, this is well sourced. And then doing the U-turn is not clever.
Yeah.
For sure.
Let's look at the Daily Mail tomorrow. Labour to release rapists and killers earlier, which is a pretty grabby headline, certainly for some. Tell us more.
So I think the government will be pretty disappointed with these headlines. What's happened today is a huge review of sentencing policy, which was commissioned by this Labour government from the former Tory Justice Minister, David Gauke, and he has suggested all sorts of emergency measures, really, including cutting the time of jail sentences for very serious crimes, a whole bunch of community sentencing and alternatives to incarceration. And some of this will be extremely controversial, not least the suggestion which came out earlier this morning about people found guilty of sex crimes potentially being chemically treated, sort of chemical castration. So it's a whole new era, potentially, in the history of Britain's penal system. But the reason they are contemplating these very radical changes is that if they don't do anything, there are literally going to be no places left in prisons from the autumn. So that would disable the court system from demonstrating that justice is done. The problem with the whole package is whether the public will think that this is justice being seen to be done if the sentences are so much shorter. What they're saying is, lots of rewards for good behaviour. It's all to do with rehabilitating more people back into the community. I think the whole thing politically is fraught with a lot of danger for the government, actually.
Yes, because no matter how well thought through the policy is and all the back office stuff and the support when offenders come out and that kind of thing that needs to happen.
That's expensive.
It's expensive, but this kind of thing's always going to be the headline, isn't it, Theo?
Yeah, the criminal justice system, exists for, numerous reasons. It acts as a deterrent so people don't commit crimes in the first place. And of course, we want to ensure that those who go into prison come out and don't reoffend. But there's also a huge reason the government would be, and there's a danger that it loses sight of this, and certainly I'm sure the Daily Mail, judging by the front page headlines of the Express and the Mail, they haven't lost sight of this, is that, the public, and especially victims of crime, want to, rightly feel that they would like when their relatives have been murdered or they've been a victim of serious crime themselves, that there is retribution, that society is willing to deprive somebody of their liberty for a significant amount of time as way of penance for the crimes that they have committed and the horror and the destruction that they've wrought on their lives. And I think you can go into this, and I'm sure ministers quite rightly go into this, and there is a crisis. You can't get people. You've got really serious offenders out on bail, awaiting sentence, unable to be sentenced because there isn't. They know that they're going. The judges know they're going to have to send them to prison there, and there isn't a place there, and therefore they have to let people out. It was described to me by one former prison inspector as a bathtub. Do you empty the plug or do you turn the tap off? Right. But it's how it is. It's worth in their mind's eye. I think the government just really being cognizant of the fact that actually they're at the very heart of this issue are the victims of appalling crimes. As the Express puts it, quotes the parents of Sarah Everard, Jeremy and Susan on their front page. It doesn't seem a serious effort has been made to understand what victims and families want.
Yes, absolutely. I think you're right. The Express going straight to Sarah Everard's parents for a quote there will bring it home for a lot of people because they'll remember exactly how they felt when they heard about her killing and also who did it. Thanks for the time being. Anyway, coming up, we'll be discussing this on the front page of The Guardian. Fears of fresh NHS strikes after doctors say pay rises are inadequate.
I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent.
An enormous explosion that's just come down. I think it was a monster that's just landed in between us.
Hundreds and hundreds of people hoping to get north, ultimately to get to the United States.
It's a border where they're not welcome, yet they keep coming.
We saw snatch squads going in, grabbing people, taking them out and putting them into trucks and taking them away.
They make about 50 kilos of fentanyl a week. It's incredibly dangerous and toxic stuff.
There's been an upsurge in deaths. The fighting between the gangs is getting more and more vicious.
Is this now all your territory?
Yeah.
The battlefield is outside the barricades, which is over there. This is much more like a normal town.
It's really sending a clear message that Venezuela is eager for change.
We've been crushed. Free from wherever you get your news. We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. This is real, hardcore emergency medicine. The information on this could bring down the entire network, not just in Iraq and Syria, but across the world. Sky News, the full story first.
Well, hundreds of thousands of people have been using the beast for years to traverse Mexico, but it is really dangerous. Many people have died riding it.
20 clubs. 10 matches, one final day. It's Premier League Championship Sunday. Broadcasting and streaming live. The Champions League chase comes to an end. And Liverpool are crowned in front of the Anfield faithful. Premier League Championship Sunday. All starting at 11 a.m. Brought to you by Expedia.
A show of military might and menace. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Sky News. Get the full story first.
Have a quick word for Sky News. Is the West right, i.e. fueling Russia's war machine? American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display.
I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war.
This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's futures.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away. So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
Welcome back. You're watching the press preview here on Sky News. With me in the studio, political journalist and broadcaster Theo Usherwood and deputy opinion editor at the Financial Times, Miranda Green. And Miranda, it would be rude not to talk about your own front page tomorrow.
Why, thank you.
The FT. Loads going on there. Of course, they've got a picture of the young couple who were shot dead in Washington as well. But let's focus on that other American story there. That is the lead headline. US lawmakers passed Trump's showpiece tax bill by one vote. Tell us more.
Well, they say about politics, don't they? The number one skill is you need to know how to count. And luckily for President Trump, there was a death. The top Democrat on the House Oversight Committee, whose vote would have denied him his entire, fiscal bill, popped his clogs, and so he got it through by one vote. And it's it's an absolute whopper of a bill, this. I mean, he calls it his big, beautiful bill. The Democrat opposition call it its one big, ugly bill, they say. It's tax cuts, huge spending cuts on things like Medicare, so it's going to hit the American poor. And it's also going to push up the percentage of debt to GDP to a record 125%. I mean, we talk about our debt levels in the UK, and the debt crisis in the Eurozone, it's dwarfed by the way that America borrows money.
Yes.
It's absolutely extraordinary. So Trump is really, the debt forecast, as it says on our front page, is going to hit $3.3 trillion. I mean, just imagine the scale of that.
The borrowing...
And the people who hurt are going to be the lowest rungs of American society. Actually.
Exactly. The borrowing is incredible, the richest country in the world, but we've seen wobbles in confidence in the dollar in recent weeks, haven't we? So...
And the bond markets, crucially. Yeah. And the bond markets are the ones who really control the world, because if they turn against your policy, you've got serious issues because you can't borrow on the markets to fund your day-to-day debt servicing.
Yes.
So we're going to be watching really carefully whether the markets cause another retreat by Trump on policy, because that has happened. His record so far in this second term is actually outrageous policy proposals and then having to retreat a bit on tariffs and on all the rest of it. So we'll see.
Let's have a look at The Guardian, Theo, because fears of fresh NHS strikes after doctors decry derisory pay rises. And we talked about headlines that the government won't be happy to see tomorrow, and this will be another one, because the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, was lauding this 4% offer earlier on today, but it's not going to do the trick, it looks like, if The Guardian's to be believed.
No, and what's interesting about this, of course, is that the 4% pay rises that are being talked about for teachers and up to 5.4% across the board has been... The unions might say they're derisory, but it's worth remembering that the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, has said that in terms of funding from government for these pay rises, they're only willing to go up to 2.8%. And then beyond that, any money that comes out for these pay rises beyond that has to come out of existing budgets. So within departments. So if to give a pay rise beyond, then that's going to mean if you want to pay teachers more, then you're going to have to recruit fewer teachers. If you want to pay police officers more, then it's going to be you're going to have fewer police officers. And I think that's the pressure on the government from, obviously the Labour government has close ties with the trade unions and the associations that represent and College of Nurses, in particular, is mentioned here, called it grotesque. There are no easy answers, especially as we head through the summer into the autumn and the budget.
And this is a government that was keen to stop that constant industrial action by the likes of train drivers last year and other public sector workers as well. They're going to have to find the money from somewhere, Miranda. If we return to the Daily Telegraph just very quickly, apparently Angela Rayner wants to strip middle-class families of child benefit. That would be a saving.
Well, that's right. So the Telegraph has this wonderful leaked memo, which dates back to March, I believe, from Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner, in which she has proposed to her colleague Rachel Reeves a somewhat different approach, which is a lot of tax rises on the higher earners. I think the first set of proposals were, I suppose you could say, FT readers. It was mostly on sort of higher earners on assets. But this is actually saying that she also wanted Rachel Reeves to reverse the changes Jeremy Hunt made to let more people.
Food for thought. Coming up next, Sky News at 11.